All right, let's get into it. Today, we're tackling a topic that is just completely changing. We're going to unbox autism, get past all those old labels and really look at the journey from just a diagnosis to true dignity.
So, let's start with a really big question. What if our whole understanding of autism is, changing? What if everything we thought we knew for decades is being turned on its head? Because that's what's happening. The ground is literally shifting under our feet, in science, in society, and it's making us rethink everything.
And you can see that shift right here. In the past, it was seen as this narrow medical label, a problem to be fixed. But the future? Totally different. We're now looking at it as a broad human spectrum. Just another way of being human, a variation, not some kind of deficit. Okay, so our first section really digs into this. It's all about seeing a spectrum, not just a label. And crucially, shifting our whole mindset from seeing a deficit to seeing a difference.
And this is the big idea behind it all. It's called the neurodiversity paradigm. Sounds complicated, but it's not. It basically says, hey, instead of trying to fix someone or make them normal, let's just accept that some brains are wired differently. The whole point is to build a world that supports that difference, instead of trying to stamp it out.
So what are we actually talking about here? Well, the core features kind of break down into four main things. First, you've got differences in how people communicate socially. Second, you often see repetitive behaviors. Third, there are these incredibly focused, deep interests. And fourth, the sensory experience is different. It can be super overwhelming or kind of muted. But here's the key. How these things show up is totally unique to every single person. No two are alike.
All right, so let's go a level deeper. It's not enough to just list traits, right? We need to get into what the actual lived experience of autism is like. We've got to look beyond what we just see on the surface.
Now, this is a really important idea. It's called the double empathy problem. For so long, we just assumed that if there was a misunderstanding, it was the autistic person's fault, But this theory completely flips that. It says, hold on, it's a two-way street. It's not just that autistic people struggle to get neurotypicals. Neurotypicals also struggle to get autistic people. It's a mutual breakdown, and both sides have to work to bridge that gap.
And here's another huge shift in thinking. Let's talk about those repetitive behaviors, like hand flapping or rocking. For a long time, people saw them as, weird or obsessive habits. But the reality? They are powerful, absolutely necessary tools for coping. They're how someone can self-regulate in a world that can feel incredibly chaotic and just too much.
Okay, let's dive into that sensory world for a second. For a lot of autistic people, it's like the volume on the world is turned up to 11. That's what we call hypersensitivity. Think about it. The buzz of a fluorescent light might sound like a power drill. The little tag on a t-shirt could feel like sandpaper. It's a constant, non-stop sensory attack.
But, and this is why it's a spectrum, it can go the other way too. On the flip side, you have hyposensitivity. This is where the world feels kind of dull or muted. So that can lead to what we call sensory-seeking behaviors, things like spinning or even crashing into stuff, because the brain is craving that input it needs to feel present and grounded.
All right, let's switch gears and look at the science. Because wow, things have changed. We've really moved away from all those old, harmful theories that were all about blame and into a real biological understanding of what's going on.
And this right here is a total game changer. The old idea that there's one single autism gene, that's gone. Forget about it. It's not like flipping a single light switch. Think of it more like a giant, complex sound mixing board with hundreds of different sliders. We now know it's this mosaic of hundreds of gene variations that all interact with each other and with environmental factors, especially when the brain is developing. It's a difference in the entire network, not just one broken part.
And all this new science, it's completely changing how we diagnose autism. You can see the evolution right here. We started with just observing behavior. Then we got smarter and started looking at genetics to see connections. And now we're on the cusp of using AI to screen for risk factors in infants. This could bring the age of diagnosis down to under 2 years old. That's huge.
So what does all this mean in the real world? This table lays it out perfectly. The goal isn't normalization anymore, it's about fostering independence. We're not trying to just suppress behaviors, we're trying to understand why they're happening. And maybe the most important shift of all, the autistic person is no longer just a passive patient. They're an active participant in figuring out their own support. They're in the driver's seat.
Okay, so we have all this new knowledge. Now what? What do we do with it? That's what this next section is about. How do we actually build a more inclusive world? How do we go from just being aware to actually doing something?
And this is the absolute core of it. The burden of change is shifting. For the longest time, we've basically been asking autistic people to change who they are to fit into our world. Now, finally, the question is changing. We're starting to ask, how can we change? How can our schools, our jobs, our communities become more welcoming and accessible for everyone?
And you know what? It's already happening. Take a look at the corporate world. Big companies like SAP and Microsoft are totally rethinking things. They're getting rid of stressful face-to-face interviews and using project-based tests instead, which really lets autistic strengths shine. They're building offices that are sensory-friendly, and the results? They speak for themselves. They're keeping talented employees, and they're seeing amazing innovation from a group of people who are overlooked for way too long.
And man, this quote just hits it right on the head. Maybe the biggest, most powerful change of all is the rise of self-advocacy. Real progress doesn't come from other people speaking for autistic people. It comes when we create the space for them to speak for themselves. When we give them the respect and the platform to tell their own stories and lead their own conversations.
So, for our last section, let's talk about what's next. Because look, we've made some amazing progress, for sure, but the journey isn't over. Not by a long shot. There are still some really big challenges ahead of us.
And you can see some of the biggest hurdles right here. First, there's this huge gap in diagnosis. If you live in a wealthy city, you have access to way more resources than if you're in a rural area. Then there's the problem of underdiagnosis in adults, and especially in women and girls, who often get so good at masking, at hiding their traits to fit in, that they're missed completely. And finally, we've got a long way to go in properly training the people on the front lines, the teachers, the doctors, you name it.
So it all comes down to this, doesn't it? We're more aware than ever. We kind of know what we need to do. So the question is, for all of us, how do we actually take that awareness and turn it into real, lasting action?
Because in the end, that's the whole point. It's about looking past a simple label and seeing the entire person. It's about affirming their dignity, recognizing all the amazing things they're capable of, and truly celebrating neurodiversity as just another beautiful, vital thread in the incredible tapestry of what it means to be human. And that's the future we're all working to build.